You won't believe what I'm about to share tonight. I'm talking about real-life encounters in abandoned lake houses tucked deep in the Appalachian mountains. Places where the air feels heavier, the shadows linger longer, and something unseen is always watching. These aren't just stories to give you chills. They're true experiences from people who felt their hearts race, who ran from places that should have felt safe but didn't. Welcome back, guys, to Mr. Skeleton. In today's episode, I'm sharing 6 true haunting lake house experiences in Appalachia. Each story is filled with that uneasy mix of isolation, lingering dread, and moments so real you'll feel like you're right there on the edge of the water. Some of these encounters are subtle, some are terrifying, but all of them will stay with you long after the video ends. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and share it with anyone who loves a good scare. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I read every one of them and love seeing how far these stories reach. All right, keep the lights low and let's begin. I arrived at the lake house just as the last orange sliver of sun disappeared behind the mountains. The air had already turned sharp, carrying the scent of wet pine and decaying leaves. I'd driven most of the day, the winding Appalachian road stretching longer than I expected. But there was something about the isolation of that place that called to me. The house had been empty for years, boards weathered and splintered, paint peeling, the roof sagging like it had been swallowed by the forest itself. But it felt familiar. Not in a comforting way, but like it was waiting for me. I parked my truck on the gravel clearing and stepped out, boots crunching softly against the stone and dirt. The silence hit immediately. Not the kind of quiet where you can hear a breeze. It was heavier, thicker, like the forest itself had sucked the sound from the air. I should have left then. I should have turned around. But I didn't. The first night was almost serene. I carried a lantern up to the porch and set it down on the rotting railing, the light flickering across the warped boards. I wandered down to the dock, drawn to the water even though something deep in my chest told me to stay inside. The lake was still, glassy, reflecting the ragged tree line as if the world had paused. I sat on the edge, legs dangling, listening to the soft lapping against the posts. And then I noticed it, a dark shape moving just beneath the surface. It didn't break the water. There were no ripples, no waves. Just a shift, subtle but deliberate, like someone or something was lying in wait. My first thought was shadows and light playing tricks. A trick of the fading sun, but the longer I stared, the heavier the air became, as if the forest itself was pressing in on me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was imagining things. I stayed out there longer than I should have, watching the water swallow the last traces of sunlight. By the time I returned inside, the house had grown colder, the wood groaning under its own weight, each creak echoing like a warning. I sat in the living room, staring at the windows, feeling uneasy. Every reflection seemed wrong, subtly altered. My eyes would catch movement in the corner of the glass. My own reflection, but not exactly me. Shadows in my eyes that weren't mine. A slight tilt to my posture I didn't recognize. I laughed quietly, trying to convince myself it was nerves, fatigue, the isolation messing with my head. I kept glancing at the clock. Midnight. I should have gone to bed, but I couldn't. The house felt alive. Not with the kind of life I know, but something waiting, patient, watching. Sleep eventually came in small, fitful bursts, interrupted by the soft, almost imperceptible sound of something scraping along the wood outside. When morning came, the world seemed normal again, or at least normal enough. The sun filtered through the clouds, bouncing off the lake's surface, giving everything a deceptive warmth. I stepped outside, still uneasy, trying to convince myself the night had been a dream. And then I saw the footprints. They were faint in the mud along the shoreline, beginning at the edge of the dock and heading straight into the water. At first, I thought a raccoon or deer had wandered near the lake, but the prints were too human, too deliberate. They stopped abruptly halfway into the shallow water, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished. I knelt, inspecting the mud. There was no sign of struggle, no disturbance beyond the prints. Nothing, just emptiness, the lake swallowing the trail like it had never existed. My stomach sank. I tried to tell myself it was an illusion, some strange trick of the ground, but the feeling of being watched returned tenfold, crawling under my skin and settling there. I didn't speak of it aloud. I didn't need to. The forest had a way of pressing in without words, of making you understand with glances of shadow and silence. I spent the day trying to distract myself, cleaning the cabin a little, checking the foundations, making a fire, but everything felt wrong. Objects shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. The kettle I'd left on the stove would be in a different spot. The wind through the broken window sounded less like wind and more like a whisper, a low hum, almost musical, like someone, or something, was singing to itself under its breath. By the time night fell again, I couldn't stay indoors. I had to see the lake. I walked to the dock, lantern in hand, heart thumping like a hammer in my chest. The water was calm, perfectly calm, reflecting the stars and moon. And then I heard it, the hum, soft at first, rising from somewhere below the planks. It wasn't words, just a vibration that seemed to resonate through the wood, through my bones. My hands gripped the railing, knuckles white as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a fish, I told myself. Maybe the wind in the reeds. But the sound had intention. It was waiting for me. I froze. Something moved beneath the water again. Not a ripple, not a splash. Just a shift, subtle, deliberate, watching. I stepped back and my foot landed on a wet spot I hadn't noticed. The boards creaked, the hum grew louder, resonating in my chest. Panic surged, and I ran, not looking back, not even at the footprints that seemed to have reappeared along the dock, leading nowhere, stopping suddenly as before. I locked myself inside the cabin, heart hammering, lantern shaking in my hands. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. All I could do was listen. The hum never stopped. It whispered through the walls, the windows, the air itself. I felt its presence, patient and patient, watching me, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. The next morning, I packed my things. Every step toward the truck felt heavier than the last. The lake glimmered in the dawn light, calm, indifferent, hiding whatever had been beneath its surface. I glanced back at the dock once before I left, half expecting to see someone or something standing there, watching me leave. There was nothing, only the faintest ripples on the water as if the lake was exhaling a long, slow breath. I still think about that place. Every time I close my eyes, I see the water shifting, see those footprints vanishing into nothing, hear that low, whispering hum. I don't know if it was a person, or an animal, or something else entirely. But I know it was real. I know it was patient, and sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear it again, calling from the dark, waiting just beneath the surface, just out of reach. I promised myself I'd never go back, but there's a part of me that wants to see it again, wants to understand it, and that scares me more than the lake itself ever could. By the time I reached the highway, the forest had already swallowed the house from view, but the feeling stayed with me, heavy and unshakable. The kind of dread that clings to your chest, that turns every shadow into a potential threat. I drove in silence, listening to the wind over the hills, remembering the hum, the still water, the footprints that led nowhere. I can't explain what I saw, what I heard, or what followed me, and I don't think I'll ever understand it. The lake house is still there, waiting, patient, hidden by the mountains and the trees. And somewhere deep down, I know it will call again. I haven't gone back. I haven't tried to. But sometimes when the night is quiet and the forest feels too still, I swear I can hear it humming, just faintly, beneath everything, like a memory I can't shake. And I know that the lake is still there, still watching, still waiting. The first evening in the lake house, I noticed the floorboards groaning in places where I hadn't walked. At first, I barely registered it. Old houses make noise, especially ones left alone as long as this had been. I told myself the sound was just wood adjusting to cooler night air, the kind of thing you stop noticing after a while. But as the light faded outside and the lake darkened into a flat sheet of black glass, the noises changed. They weren't random anymore. They had a rhythm, slow, careful, like someone testing each step before committing their weight. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, boots off, listening to the house breathe. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough to let the hallway lantern spill a thin line of light across the floor. That's when I heard it. One soft creak, followed by another, moving closer. I held my breath without realizing it. The sound stopped right outside the door. I waited, muscles tight, counting seconds in my head. Nothing. Then another creak, right where someone would stand if they were listening from the other side. I told myself it was the wind slipping through gaps in the siding. I said it out loud, like saying it would make it true. That night, sleep came in fragments. Every time I drifted off, the sound returned. Slow steps pacing the hallway, stopping, starting again. I never heard the door open. I never heard breathing. Just footsteps, measured and deliberate, like whoever or whatever was out there didn't want to rush me. When morning came, I felt stupid for being scared. The house looked harmless in daylight, slouched and quiet, dust floating through sunbeams like it always had. I laughed at myself while making coffee, the sound echoing too loudly in the empty rooms. It didn't stop. Each evening, the noises returned, always after dark, always careful. Sometimes they circled the bedroom. Other times, they moved from the kitchen to the living room and back again, tracing paths I recognized from my own steps earlier that day. I stopped leaving things out at night. I closed doors. I checked windows. I even stepped outside with a flashlight once, sweeping the beam across the trees in the dock, half expecting to catch someone slipping away into the woods. I never saw anything. The lake stayed still. The forest stayed silent. That silence pressed in harder than any noise could. On the fourth night, I opened the bedroom door. I don't know why I did it. Maybe the waiting had become worse than the fear. The hallway was empty, lantern light stretching down the warped floorboards. I took one step forward, then another. That's when I saw the footprints. Muddy, wet, clearly defined. They started near the kitchen, tracked through the hallway, and stopped at the front window. Right at the edge of the porch, the prints were bare. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too long in the toes, pressed deep like whoever made them carried more weight than they should have. I stood there for a long time, staring, my heart beating so hard it hurt. The door was still locked. The windows were still shut. No mud anywhere else. Just the prints, as if someone had stepped inside, crossed the house, and then vanished into thin air. I felt watched in a way I never had before, not from one place, but from everywhere at once, like the house itself had eyes. I didn't sleep at all after that. Days passed, heavy and slow. I told myself I'd leave soon, just one more night, just one more day to convince myself this wasn't real. But each night was worse. The footsteps grew closer, louder, stopping just outside my door for longer stretches of time. Sometimes I'd hear them circle the bed, even though I knew they couldn't be inside without opening the door. I stopped turning the lantern off. I stopped lying down. I sat against the wall with a flashlight in my lap, staring at the door until my eyes burned. The lake changed too. During the day, I caught movement beneath the surface, dark shapes gliding just out of sight, never breaking the water. At night, the reflections in the windows didn't match my movements. I'd raise my hand, and the reflection would lag behind, just a fraction of a second too slow. I stopped looking at them altogether. On the last night, the footsteps didn't pace. They stood still, right outside the bedroom door. For hours, no creaking, no shifting, just presence. I could feel it pressing against the thin wood, patient and certain. At some point, I realized I was crying without making a sound. I didn't know what would happen if I opened the door, but I knew I couldn't stay. I left at first light. I didn't pack carefully. I threw what I could into my bag and stepped onto the porch, my skin crawling as if I were stepping into someone else's space. The air felt thick, charged. I started down the path toward the road, gravel crunching under my boots. Behind me, I heard it. Footsteps, matching mine. One step behind. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I did, something irreversible would happen. The sound followed me past the dock, past the trees, all the way to the old iron gate that marked the edge of the property. The gate hadn't been used in years. Rust flaked off as I pushed it open. The moment I crossed through, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was sudden and absolute, like the world had cut the sound cleanly in half. I stood there shaking, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. When I finally looked back, the path was empty. No footprints, no movement, just the house in the distance, half hidden by trees, watching. I don't know how I knew it was watching. I just did. I've never gone back, but sometimes, when I'm walking alone at night and the world grows quiet in that familiar, heavy way, I hear it again. One careful step behind me, then another. And I know deep down that whatever followed me out of that lake house didn't stay there. It just learned how to wait. I took a late evening walk along the edge of the lake because staying inside the house had started to feel worse than being out in the open. The air had been still all day, heavy and damp, and by the time the sun dipped behind the mountains, fog began to creep in from the water like something alive. At first it clung low to the surface, thin enough that I could still see the dark outline of the opposite shore. I told myself I'd just walk a little, clear my head, remind myself I was alone and in control. The path along the lake was narrow, dirt packed hard from years of use that had long since stopped. My boots made soft, dull sounds, swallowed quickly by the thickening air. The fog rolled in faster than I expected. Within minutes, the trees closest to the water faded into pale silhouettes, their trunks stretched and warped by the haze. The lake itself disappeared, replaced by a dull gray void that reflected no light at all. I remember thinking how quiet it had become. No insects, no frogs, not even the distant rustle of leaves. Just my footsteps and my own breathing, loud and uneven, like it didn't belong in the space around me. That's when I saw the lantern. At first, it was just a soft, warm glow hovering ahead along the shoreline. A single point of light, swaying gently, rising and falling as if someone were walking with it. I stopped moving and stared, my heart thumping in my ears. The light bobbed again, slow and steady, unmistakably carried by a human hand. My first thought was relief. Another person meant explanation. Another person meant I wasn't losing my mind. I called out, my voice sounding thin and wrong as it vanished into the fog. There was no answer. But the lantern continued on, following the curve of the lake. Curiosity got the better of fear. I started walking toward it, picking up my pace just enough to feel like I was closing the distance. The light stayed just ahead, never getting closer, never drifting farther away. Fog brushed against my arms and face, cold and damp, clinging to my clothes until my skin prickled beneath the fabric. I kept my eyes locked on that glow, afraid that if I looked away, even for a second, it would be gone. After a while, I realized something wasn't right. No matter how fast I walked, the lantern stayed the same distance away. The shoreline curved, but the light never disappeared behind trees or rocks. It floated in the open fog, steady and patient. I slowed to a stop, breathing hard, trying to listen. That's when I heard it. My name, soft, drawn out, distorted, like it was being carried across water. I turned toward the sound, my chest tightening. The lake was invisible now, hidden behind layers of fog, but the voice came from that direction, low and coaxing. I told myself it was the wind. I told myself it was my imagination filling in gaps. Still, I answered. My voice shook as I called back, asking who was there. The lantern stopped moving. It hung motionless in the fog, the light pulsing faintly, as if responding. Then, without warning, it vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, swallowed completely by the mist. I stood there, frozen, my heart racing, scanning the gray nothingness ahead. Before I could move, the lantern reappeared farther down the path, well beyond where it had been before. The same warm glow, the same slow, bobbing motion. It was waiting. I didn't want to follow it anymore. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run, but my legs felt heavy, unresponsive. I took another step, then another, drawn forward by something I couldn't name. My breathing grew louder, ragged, echoing in my own head. The fog thickened until I could barely see my hands in front of me, but that lantern remained perfectly clear, an anchor in the shifting gray. Again, I heard my name. This time closer, not from the lantern, but from across the water, somewhere to my left. The sound was wrong, stretched thin, like it was being pulled apart. I spun toward it, panic clawing up my throat, and for a moment I thought I saw movement in the fog. Tall, dark shapes standing just beyond sight, watching. When I turned back, the lantern was gone again. I don't remember deciding to run, only the sudden burn in my lungs and the way my boots slipped on damp ground as I stumbled back the way I came. The fog wrapped around me, disorienting, making every step feel uncertain. I kept expecting to feel a hand on my shoulder, to hear footsteps behind me, but there was nothing, just my breath and the pounding of my heart. When the lake house finally came into view, its dark outline emerging from the mist, relief hit me so hard, my knees nearly buckled. I climbed the porch steps and stopped dead. The lantern was hanging from the porch beam, swaying gently, its glass glowing warm and steady. The same lantern I'd followed along the shore, the same one that had vanished and reappeared in the fog. It hung there like it had always been part of the house, like it had never left at all. My skin crawled as I stared at it, a cold wave of understanding settling in my gut. I hadn't followed it. It had led me, and now it was back where it belonged. I didn't touch it. I didn't step any closer. I went inside and locked the door, even though I knew how useless that was. I sat on the edge of the bed all night, listening to the fog press against the walls, to faint sounds outside that might have been footsteps, or might have been nothing at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bobbing light drifting ahead of me, just out of reach, I packed my things at first light. The fog had lifted, leaving the lake calm and empty, like nothing had happened. The lantern still hung on the porch beam, unlit now, just an old object again. I didn't look at it as I left. I didn't want to see it glowing. Even now, long after I've left that place behind, the image stays with me. A single light in the fog, waiting. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night and see a distant glow through mist or rain, my chest tightens and I have to look away. Because part of me is afraid that if I follow it, I'll end up right back where it started. Standing on that shore, listening to my name being called from the dark water, with no clear way home. The lake house had large windows that faced the water, old panes set into warped wooden frames, their glass thick and slightly uneven from age. During the day, they reflected the lake so perfectly, it was hard to tell where the water ended and the house began. At night, they turned into mirrors. Dark, glossy, unforgiving mirrors. I noticed that the first evening I stayed there, standing in the living room with only a single lamp on behind me, the black surface of the window showing my outline floating over the lake's reflection like a ghost layered on top of the world. At first, it unsettled me in a harmless way, the kind of discomfort you feel when you catch a reflection somewhere unexpected. I waved at myself once, half joking, half testing, and the shape in the glass waved back. Same timing, same movement. I laughed quietly and turned away, telling myself I'd been alone too long already. It wasn't until the third night that something felt off. I was pacing the living room, restless, unable to sleep. The house creaked around me, settling into the cold night air. The lake outside was perfectly still, the moon hanging low over the mountains. I stopped in front of the largest window without realizing why. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tired, eyes ringed with dark shadows. I blinked. The reflection blinked a heartbeat later. I frowned, leaning closer to the glass. I blinked again, slower this time, deliberately. Again, the reflection followed, but late, just enough to notice. A fraction of a second, maybe less, but enough that my stomach tightened. I laughed under my breath, forcing the sound out. "You're tired," I told myself. That's all. I stepped back, rubbed my face, and tried not to think about it. But once I'd noticed it, I couldn't stop watching. Over the next few nights, the delay became more obvious. If I turned my head quickly, the reflection lagged behind, catching up just a moment too late. If I raised my hand, it mirrored the motion, but the timing was off, like a poorly synced video. I told myself the glass was warped, the light uneven. Old windows distort reflections. I'd read that somewhere. Still, I stopped standing directly in front of them unless I had to. The night it smiled at me, I stopped making excuses. I was standing farther back this time near the kitchen doorway, staring at the reflection from a distance. My face was blank, my jaw tight. The reflection's mouth twitched, just slightly. Then it smiled, slow and deliberate, teeth showing. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. After a long, terrible second, the reflection's expression shifted back to match mine, neutral, intense, as if nothing had happened. I staggered away from the window, refusing to look at it again that night. I slept with the bedroom door closed and the lights on, my back to the wall, staring at the ceiling until dawn. The next day, I avoided the windows entirely. I kept my head down, moved quickly from room to room, but the feeling followed me, the sense of being watched from behind glass. That night, I couldn't resist checking again. I stood close this time, so close my breath fogged the pain. My reflection appeared immediately, perfectly still, eyes locked on mine. I lifted my hand and pressed my palm against the glass. The reflection raised its hand too, but instead of touching where I touched, it placed its palm inches away. Close enough to look right, wrong enough to make my skin crawl. I shifted my hand to the side. The reflection mirrored the movement, but kept that small distance, never quite lining up. I swallowed hard and pulled my hand back. The reflection didn't. Its hand stayed raised, pressed flat against the inside of the glass, fingers splayed. Slowly, it leaned forward, its face closer than mine should have been, eyes searching mine with an intensity that didn't feel human. I stumbled backward, heart racing, and the reflection snapped back into place, copying my movement perfectly again, like it had never broken the rules. That was when I realized it wasn't a trick of the glass. It was learning. Over the next 2 days, the reflection grew bolder. It started moving before I did. A tilt of the head, a shift of weight, a blink that came early instead of late. Sometimes, when I wasn't even looking directly at the window, I'd feel a pressure between my shoulder blades, that unmistakable awareness of being stared at. When I turned, it was always there, waiting, already watching me. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom and moved to the couch, where I could avoid seeing myself reflected in the dark panes at night. Even then, I dreamed of glass, of cold surfaces and something pressing against them from the other side. The morning I found the handprints, I knew I couldn't stay. They were on the inside of the living room window. Muddy, smeared handprints, fingers long and stretched, pressed flat against the glass at shoulder height. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I hadn't been near that window since the night before. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even gone into that room after dark. Slowly, I raised my hands and compared them to the prints. They didn't match. The fingers were too long, the palms too wide, the spacing wrong, and there were more prints than I had hands. Some overlapped, as if something had been leaning there, waiting, shifting its weight. I felt sick. My reflection stared back at me from between the muddy shapes, calm and expressionless, eyes a little too bright. For just a moment, it smiled again. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't clean up. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and headed for the door. As I passed the window, I felt a sudden, sharp pressure in my chest, like the air had thickened around me. I glanced sideways despite myself. The reflection didn't move when I did. It stayed facing forward, palms pressed flat against the glass, muddy fingers splayed, smiling with a patience that made my knees weak. I tore my gaze away and fled the house, heart pounding, breath ragged, the feeling of being followed not from behind, but from everywhere the glass could see. I drove away before the sun dipped behind the mountains, gravel spraying under my tires. In the rear-view mirror, the house disappeared into the trees, its windows flashing briefly as they caught the light. For a split second, I thought I saw a movement in one of them, someone standing where I should have been. I don't go near lakes anymore. I avoid dark windows at night. I keep lights on even when I sleep. Because sometimes when I catch my reflection in a mirror or a darkened screen, it feels just a little too slow or a little too eager. And I remember those muddy handprints on the inside of the glass, and the certainty that whatever was living in that reflection wasn't trapped there anymore. It was just practicing. The lake house had an upstairs I barely used. The stairs were narrow and steep, the kind that creaked no matter how carefully you stepped, and the air up there always felt colder, heavier somehow. At the far end of the hallway was a small storage room with a warped wooden door reinforced by a thick iron padlock. The metal was rusted dark, the kind of rust that looked decades old, like no one had touched it in a very long time. I remember wondering why it was locked at all. There wasn't anything valuable in that house. Still, something about that door made me uncomfortable, so I left it alone. That first night, I woke up suddenly, heart pounding with no clear memory of a dream. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock downstairs. I lay there, staring into the darkness, listening. That's when I heard it. A faint metallic rattle, distant but unmistakable, like someone gently testing a lock. It came again, followed by a soft scrape. I sat up in bed, breath shallow, ears straining. The sound was coming from upstairs. I told myself it was the wind. Old houses make strange noises at night, especially when temperatures drop. Still, I didn't go back to sleep. I lay there for what felt like hours, waiting for the sound to return. When morning finally came, pale and gray through the windows, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. I went upstairs after breakfast, moving slowly, one step at a time. The hallway looked the same as always. Dusty floorboards, faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. The storage room door stood closed at the end, padlock still hanging from the latch. For a moment, relief washed over me. Then I noticed it was lying crooked, no longer flush against the wood as if it had been twisted. I knelt down and touched it. The metal was cold. The latch was bent just enough that the padlock slid free and dropped into my hand. I stared at it, confusion turning quickly into dread. That lock hadn't been loose before. I was sure of it. My throat felt tight as I pushed gently on the door. It creaked open a few inches. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, old leaves, the kind of smell you associate with basements or freshly turned soil. Inside, the room was small and bare, lit only by the dim light spilling in from the hallway. There were no boxes, no tools, no furniture, except for a single wooden chair lying on its side in the center of the floor. Dust covered everything except the area around the chair, where the boards looked darker, worn smooth as if something had been moving there repeatedly. I didn't step inside. I couldn't. Something about the space felt wrong, like the air itself was pressing back against me. I shut the door and backed away, my heart hammering. I told myself someone must have broken in at some point, messed with the lock, left the door loose. That explanation felt thin, but it was better than the alternatives forming in my mind. That night, the scratching started. It was subtle at first, a soft, dry sound, barely audible over the wind outside. At first, I thought it was a mouse or some other animal trapped in the walls. Then it came again, longer this time, deliberate, like fingernails being dragged slowly across wood. I froze in bed, every muscle tense. The sound came from directly above me. Scratch, paw, scratch. I held my breath, counting seconds between each noise. Whatever was making that sound wasn't frantic. It wasn't trying to escape. It was testing the space, feeling it out, listening. The scratching went on for several minutes before stopping abruptly, leaving behind a silence so deep it made my ears ring. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went upstairs again, despite every instinct telling me not to. The storage room door stood exactly as I'd left it, closed but unlocked. I opened it just enough to peer inside. The chair was still overturned, but now it had moved, just slightly. One leg rested closer to the doorway than before. The smell was stronger, heavier, clinging to the back of my throat. I shut the door and didn't open it again that day. Every night after that, the scratching returned. Sometimes it sounded close, right against the door. Other times it moved farther back into the room, tracing slow circles across the floorboards. Once, I heard what I thought was breathing, low and steady, barely there. I started sleeping with the lights on, the bedroom door locked, even though I knew how useless that was. During the day, the house felt different too. quieter, like it was holding something in. On the fourth night, the scratching stopped outside the storage room. Instead, I heard it in the hallway. It was faint, hesitant at first, like something learning the space. Nails brushing wood, a soft drag, then another. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I lay frozen, staring at the bedroom door, waiting for the handle to turn. It never did. After a long time, the sound retreated back upstairs, leaving me shaking and exhausted. That was when I understood something I'd been avoiding. Whatever was in that room hadn't just been locked away. It had been kept there. The final morning, I didn't even wait for nightfall. I packed my things with shaking hands, avoiding the stairs as much as I could. When I finally forced myself to go upstairs to grab the last of my belongings, I stopped halfway up. The storage room door was open, wide open. The chair stood upright now, placed carefully against the far wall. The air inside the room felt colder than the hallway, unnaturally so. The scratching marks were visible on the floor, long, shallow grooves etched into the wood, forming patterns I didn't want to understand. I stood there, heart racing, certain that if I stepped any closer, something would step out to meet me. I didn't wait to find out. I left the house with my heart pounding, lungs burning, the feeling of eyes on my back all the way down the driveway. Even after I reached the road, I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the upstairs window, didn't want to know if something was standing there, watching me leave. I don't know what had been locked in that room. I don't know how long it had been waiting, but I know it learned the house while I was there. I know it listened. And sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet, I swear I can hear that same soft scratching sound. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails tracing wood, reminding me that not all locked doors are meant to stay closed forever. On my last night at the lake house, I told myself I needed some kind of closure. That's what I called it anyway. A way to convince myself the fear had been exaggerated, that the house and the lake hadn't changed me in some permanent way. The day had been warm, the kind of late summer warmth that lingers even after the sun starts to sink. And for the first time since arriving, the lake looked almost inviting. Smooth, dark, quiet in a way that felt intentional. I waited until dusk, until the mountains swallowed the sun and the sky bruised purple and gray. The dock creaked under my bare feet as I walked to the edge, towel slung over my shoulder. The water reflected the fading light like a sheet of polished stone. No ripples, no insects skimming the surface. It should have been unsettling, but instead it felt like a challenge. Like the lake was daring me to turn back. I didn't. I slipped into the water slowly, bracing myself for the cold. It was worse than I expected. The chill sank into my bones immediately, sharp and biting, stealing my breath for a moment. I forced myself to keep going, wading out until the bottom dropped away and I had to start swimming. The water closed around me, thick and heavy, not moving the way water should. Still, I floated on my back, staring up at the darkening sky, listening to my own breathing. For a few seconds, it was peaceful. Then I felt something brush my ankle. It was light at first, just enough to register. I kicked reflexively, heart jumping, and felt nothing again. I told myself it was weeds, maybe a branch drifting beneath the surface. The lake was old, untended. Things accumulated in places like this. I rolled onto my stomach and started swimming back toward the dock, more for reassurance than anything else. That's when the tug came again. Stronger this time. My foot jerked backward, hard enough to pull my leg straight. Panic flared instantly. I kicked with my free leg, churning the water, but the resistance felt wrong. The lake didn't move the way it should have. It felt dense, almost solid, like I was trying to swim through mud. I reached down instinctively, fingers plunging into black cold, grasping at nothing I could identify. Whatever had hold of me tightened. I screamed. The sound was muffled, swallowed by the water and the night. I kicked harder, lungs burning, muscles screaming as the tug dragged me lower. My head dipped beneath the surface, and the world went silent except for the rush in my ears. The darkness down there felt endless, pressing in from every direction. I couldn't see what had me, only felt the pressure around my ankle, unyielding and patient. It didn't thrash. It didn't rush. It pulled. I clawed at the water, scraping my hands against something rough beneath the surface. Rocks, maybe, or the edge of the lake bed. Pain shot through my fingers, but it gave me leverage. I twisted violently, kicking with everything I had left. Something slipped. The pressure loosened just enough for me to wrench my leg free. I don't remember how I reached the shore. I only remember coughing water onto the sand, my chest heaving, every breath tearing at my throat. My whole body shook uncontrollably, teeth chattering so hard I thought they might crack. I lay there for a long moment, face pressed into the damp earth, terrified that if I moved, whatever had been in the water would come after me. When I finally forced myself to look back, the lake was calm again, perfectly calm. The surface reflected the sky as if nothing had happened. No ripples, no sign of disturbance. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined it all, if panic had made me feel something that wasn't there. Then I saw them. At the edge of the water, just where the lake met the shore, two faint points of light hovered above the surface. Close together, steady, watching. They weren't bright, not glowing the way a flashlight would. They were dull, cold, like light filtered through deep water. They didn't blink. They didn't move. I scrambled backward, heart slamming against my ribs, not taking my eyes off that spot until I tripped over the dock and fell hard onto the planks. When I looked again, the lights were gone. The water lapped gently against the shore, innocent and empty. I didn't go back inside the house that night. I wrapped myself in the towel and sat on the porch until morning, shivering even after the cold left my skin. Every sound made me flinch. Every creak of the dock, every distant splash somewhere out in the darkness felt like a warning. When the sky finally lightened, I packed what little I had left and drove away without looking back. I never returned to that lake house. I don't swim in lakes anymore. I don't float. I don't trust still water, no matter how peaceful it looks. Sometimes, when I'm driving past one at dusk, I catch myself scanning the shoreline, half expecting to see those same faint eyes watching from the edge, waiting, because whatever grabbed me that night didn't feel angry. It didn't feel desperate. It felt patient. And I know, deep down, that if I'd stayed in the water even a second longer, I wouldn't have come back out at all.